Chances are you've heard of DaVinci Resolve.
Goodbye, Adobe.
DaVinci Resolve, I just straight up wouldn't have believed it.
It is taking the editing community by storm. Editors flocking, singing its praises. The greatest thing to happen to editing ever. But today I pose the question, if you use Final Cut, should you switch? Or is there maybe a world where you could play with both? Guys, everyone is switching to DaVinci. You've probably heard about it. That's probably why you're here. You're curious, and if you're here too, it's probably because maybe you use Final Cut. I think that I can simplify it in a way that hopefully will bring some people a lot of peace and comfort, and to those that still are feeling a little bit of angst, maybe give them a few ideas on how to stay relevant and not have FOMO, but also maybe, not completely derail their entire workflow. You've heard about people switching to Resolve, and it's kind of become a meme at this point. A lot of people on the internet are saying things like, how do you know that someone switched to DaVinci Resolve? Well, they tell you right away. And while it's kind of a funny joke and certainly has been a massive trend in the editing and filmmaking industry the past, several months to a year, I gotta say, it's the core of what I'm about to kind of tell you guys, which is that I think that there is something to this meme that really rings true and potentially dictates my recommendations on if you're using Final Cut, why you maybe don't really need to switch, and maybe probably shouldn't. The reason you hear about people switching to Resolve is because, generally speaking, and again, there are other examples, but when I see this, watch these YouTube videos, these are people coming from Premiere. Now again, Premiere is super expensive. You have to pay monthly. It has a horrible track record of adding new bugs on a regular basis and just in general, not working all that fantastic. So of course, it's absolutely no shocker that these people decided to finally try a new software. They were fed up with all of the crashes, the headaches, the late nights where they couldn't finish edits. And of course, they're screaming at the top of their lungs how great Resolve is because, well, it does all of the basics really well. And of course, to make things interesting, they also want to talk about all of the cool features that Resolve has. And again, I am in that camp. I fall in that camp. DaVinci Resolve is just fantastically cool and is doing fantastically cool things. But at the end of the day, you're hearing people so excited about switching, not because there's all these new features, but it's because it works well. And suddenly their editing workflow is fantastic. They're in flow state more often, and they're frustrated less. And so in a nutshell, this whole sentiment really circles back to, if you're using Final Cut, should you switch? And I think what I would just say is, if you're using Final Cut, if you're happy, if you're making videos that you enjoy and you're loving that magnetic timeline, which you should be, again, I think it's the greatest thing ever made. The fact of the matter is, I don't think you should switch. Now, if you're having a horrible and unrelenting feeling of FOMO towards everyone jumping ship to Resolve, I have kind of a couple of suggestions where I want to maybe give you some ideas to incorporate DaVinci into your Final Cut workflow without necessarily having to switch completely and learn a brand new software. If you want to head over, here's kind of some things that at least I've been doing lately. Like, I love the magnetic timeline. So a lot of times if I'm making a personal video, I want to edit in the magnetic timeline, but there's definitely some things in Resolve that I want to play with as well and or use, and let's kind of go through sort of that workflow and that list now. One thing that Resolve is really good at is audio syncing. So a lot of times I'll actually bring in my clips into Resolve first and actually use the in-timeline sync feature when I'm not, again, a lot of times you're digging through clips, you don't know what audio goes with what, and just being able to go through and think, oh, I think this one kind of works, sync it, okay, it's synced and it synced it perfectly, great. Now I can export that clip with the better audio and then use that to edit in Final Cut. That process, in my experience, has always been phenomenal. There's an idea to maybe have some of your pre-processing workflow in Resolve and then still edit in Final Cut. So you do your whole edit, you finish it all up, and then you decide, hey, again, I want to kind of dip my toes into Resolve. Well, export that Final Cut project in ProRes or, whatever you want, and then throw it in DaVinci Resolve and play around with the color grading. Again, color grading in Resolve is really fun. It works really well. And it kind of, again, is a way to get familiar with that node system and just kind of understand some of these things that you're not familiar with in Final Cut and get some really cool looks that are just, again, not impossible to get with Final Cut, but it's so easy doing those color and looks in Resolve. Play around with that. And then while you're doing that, also go over to the Fairlight page and do some of the audio processing. Get that audio that you rendered from Final Cut sounding crisp and polished. I do that all the time. And again, it's not like it's a whole bunch of work, but I think it just makes a huge difference on your final product. Okay, and lastly, Apple Motion is cool. I honestly haven't used it enough to really talk about it, but I know a lot of people love it. If you are thinking about heading to Resolve, definitely think about doing some comps, some special effects, some graphics in the Fusion tab with that node system. It's a great way to play around with DaVinci Resolve and not have to have a whole edit in the software. Maybe you just want to do a magic mask where you cut out a person or something like that. Maybe you want to play around with some actual Bezier keyframes and animate text popping in and out. Do it in Fusion. That's another way that you can kind of do that and then export it and put it in your Final Cut edit. Again, I'm just kind of coming up with ways where you could use both of these softwares and still kind of get the best of both worlds and not have to completely jump ship. I'm going to end it there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.